Okay, so I'm just gonna do this video now. I'm just gonna stay in the same spot. So the next one is having to do with identity. So, do you ever question your genderqueer identity? I do. I honestly do. Let me read the whole question. Do you ever question your genderqueer identity? Do you ever feel not genderqueer enough or too trans? Do you have conflicting identities or identities you feel are conflicting? So, to start off with, I identify as a genderqueer trans FTM stone butch boy. Boy with an I. So basically, I'm gonna be kind of deconstructing my identity, I guess. I reckon. Yeah. So, I'm gonna start with the end of it actually. So, boy and butch. So, I identify as a boy because I'm female assigned at birth. But I feel masculine. I like girls. The definition of boy, I found the definition, it really just fit. BOI, yeah. Except I did read some articles and things and some definitions and boys talking about a slight bit of femininity with that, which is and is not true. Depends on the person. But I also identify as butch, so I, even though I've never identified as a lesbian, I identify with the butch lesbian community a lot, having been perceived and basically living as a lesbian for quite a few years. Even though knowing that never truly fit. So yeah, and I think I identify more with kind of like the old school lesbians, butch lesbians, kind of like Ivan Coyote, and butches like Esper Bergman, people like them, and so that's a really important identity to me. I feel very butch. I hope I come off as butch. I like to think myself as butch. And what else? I really like kind of the brotherhood of the sisterhood, and just kind of the struggles that butchers have had to go throughout the years, and those that have been very parallel to my journey. And so, yeah, I just deeply identify, and strongly identify with all of that. So when I see like butch lesbians hating on the trans guys, and it really makes me sad. I really dislike that. Actually, anyone hating on anyone, but that especially. And so where the first conflict for me is trans and butch. So butch means masculine and stuff. So there are butch gay guys, there are butch cis women, there are butch trans girls. So basically, as I don't identify as a butch lesbian, I identify as a butch trans guy. I identify with the butch community in all of its forms, or most of its forms, but I also identify as a trans guy, but not a femtrans guy. But I also identify as genderqueer, which is getting to the heart of the matter, I guess. So sometimes I feel, in the question I wrote, do you sometimes not feel like you're not genderqueer enough, or you feel too trans? And for me, I sometimes feel too trans, too trans, meaning that I have kind of gone from being perceived from this end of the spectrum, kind of, and now being perceived from this at this end of the spectrum. And genderqueer, I would fall like all along here, up here, whatever. But the thing is actually, you know what? I'm going to read from a book by someone who identifies as butch, about the kind of identity stuff, because I think it really sums it up for me. In this book, it's called Butch is a Noun. It's really kind of encompassed a lot of how I feel, and it's really helped me a lot. First of all, Butch is a Noun is an excellent book. The chapter Border Wars is amazing. It's amazing. I'm just gonna read this. You cannot piss in a cup or pull a sword from a stone or anything else in order to tell you if you're trans or not. You are if you want to be, you're not if you don't. This is what I say, no one listens. That's like my attitude. Definition of transgender, really, I agree with. Kind of my whole experience. Oh my god. You have no idea. This book is so amazing. But this isn't what I want to get to. Oh, and basically, so, just remind me. So basically with the whole butch identity is there's something called, like, butch flight. And it's basically I hear from butches that they are saddened from what they think of as butch flight, that people who once might have lived as butches are now living as men, and it makes them sad. So the thing is for me, I identify as butch, but in a way you would say that I've flown. But then and the thing is here it says, like, they want back the visibly queer butches. So basically, I want people to see me how I identify, and how I want people to read me as butch, but I also want it to be called Keenan and he, and be called all those words like sir and everything, and be seen as a guy. So I want my cake and I want to eat it too. And I know that's not gonna happen, but basically, I'm in this limbo. Basically, I identify as masculine. Identifies masculine, but I identify with terms that have been put with masculinity. But here, this is how I also feel about identifying as genderqueer here. See, this here. And then I hear from FTMs, MTMs, trans men, I'm gonna skip that one. Trans guys, and so on. Pick your favorite or write in your own, who are deeply troubled by the idea of butches claiming trans identities. I hear them talk about how difficult it is for them to make the transition, to insist that people respect their choices and their genders, and how difficult it is to make their mothers call them he and Jonathan, when the same mothers are reading about young genderqueer butches who don't care what pronoun you use and cheerfully rename themselves with the least marginally gender-neutral things like Cooper and Jaden. They speak about how some days it feels like there is not enough distance in the world to put between themselves and the genderqueer community. So that's the thing is I have that. I basically identify with 3 different communities, and I can sympathize with all of their concerns about the other 2 communities and everything. So it's like, it's basically taking butch and genderqueer and trans and mixing it all up and understanding, and all the way identifying as masculine, and then boy off in the corner, and then not identifying as straight, because even though I like girls and identify as a guy, I can't bring myself to use the word straight. It just, other people can use it for me, I guess, but like yesterday I was introducing myself and I was like, hey, I'm a trans guy and I like girls. I can't bring myself to saying I'm straight. And so basically I can understand each community's problems and I go on each side of them because, in a way, I can see exactly where they're coming from, yet I'm also the problem. And that it's confusing for me, but then again, that's why I love the word genderqueer, is because then I can identify however the hell I want. But as trans is an umbrella term, and then butch as another, I understand it perfectly, but then I don't understand it at all. And it's something that it's interesting because I don't know anyone who identifies exactly how I identify. I mean, I've met tons of trans guys that I completely sympathize with, and we get along great, and our experiences are so similar, and it's awesome, and it's great hanging out with them. And then I talk to other genderqueer people who have similar struggles with me, and then honestly, I don't know too many butches actually like that I super identify with. But yeah, it's interesting. And that's why sometimes I question being on this channel, being like, am I too trans? Because oftentimes I find myself referring to just being trans or as a guy and stuff, and yeah, and sometimes I wonder if I truly do identify as genderqueer, but then I remind myself, you know what, it's my identity. I can define it and present however the hell I want. It's an interesting conflict, and basically this is just me workshopping through it right now. I mean, I've been identifying this for about a year, 2 years now, I think maybe 2 years, and I probably will always identify as this, just because I think I have so many terms. I like to organize things. So many terms that I think I encompass everything. But yeah, it's really interesting. Identifying with 3 communities and being that identity, and then being the problem, and then realizing that it's not a problem, and that it's a conflict. It's a conflict, yet everything works harmoniously. And it's sometimes tough. Honestly, it's kind of tough sometimes, but then it's fine. Yeah. Basically, I wish I could just wear a sign around that says, I identify as a genderqueer trans FTM Stone Butch Boy. I'm not getting into the stone part. Butch Boy, and then that, yeah. I guess I haven't read Stone Butch Blues. I'd probably really identify with the main character, probably. Not an impression sort, but with the identity, I reckon. Thank you for watching if you've watched all this. Yeah. Okay. See ya.